You're lucky. Watching live sports never used to be this easy. Running up and down that field looks tough.
It's a pitch.
Get way more into what you're into when you stream on the Xfinity 10G network.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Inquire Live at Gameday Central, sponsored by Xfinity. Today, we're coming from you live from the press box at Raymond James Stadium here in Tampa as we get set for the Eagles' Week 3 matchup against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Alongside Eagles beat reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer, EJ Smith, I am Olivia Reiner. EJ, how are you enjoying this beautiful, toasty Tampa fall day?
Yeah, that's like a loaded question. It's definitely a little hot, but listen, I'm not complaining. It's good to be here. I'm excited for the game. And yeah, I don't know if we're going to have like a Taylor Swift level appearance at this stadium today, but hey, you never know. You really never know. So
we may not have a Taylor Swift appearance, but we will most likely have a DeAndre Swift appearance. So you get one Swift. Not too bad. Throughout the season, we will be coming from you live all season long before every single game, roughly 90 minutes or so before kickoff to tell you everything you need to know about the Eagles. EJ, where can they find us all season long?
Yeah, inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day is where we want to hear from you guys. We're going to be in there. We're going to let you know what we see from the stadium, give you guys our instant analysis. But we also want that to be a two-way conversation. We want you guys to let us know what you're seeing on the broadcast, what your takeaways are from the game. We're even going to use some of those comments for a segment called Fan Zone, formerly known as what you said. That's one of my favorite segments. So like I said, head over there. It's inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day. So anyway, Olivia, I think it's time for us to get into it.
Absolutely. Let's talk about some of the biggest storylines heading into today's game. I don't think we can discuss this game before trying to frame it a little bit, because the last time the Eagles played the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and, having memories about this team, the stadium, it wasn't exactly, they shouldn't be fond memories for Eagles fans. This is where the Eagles lost the NFC wildcard game a couple seasons ago. I think even, Jalen Hurts, we talked a little bit about it earlier this week. EJ, you wrote about this too, about kind of how he's grown as a quarterback since then. You kind of remember the Bucs cornerbacks coach, Kevin Ross, saying on the sideline during that game, that clip went viral across social media, that Hurts couldn't read a defense. Those were his words. Since then, the Eagles are 16-3-0 in the regular season. A lot has changed for this team. How does that game kind of set the stage for the team that this group has morphed into over the years?
Yeah, it seems like ever since that January afternoon, it was a little bit different weather here last time we were here, but, I can remember it, very, very vividly. And it feels like ever since then, the Eagles have been a completely different team. Now, listen, some of that's off-season additions, A.J. Brown being a big one on offense. I think that he really did change a lot, of what they could do in the passing game. But, that was the big question coming out of that season was, everyone could tell the Eagles could run the ball. They were one of the best rushing offenses once Nick Sirianni turned things over to a more run-first approach that year. And that's what got them into the playoffs, is that framework. And, there were questions about Jalen Hurts. Listen, Kevin Ross might get a bad rap now for those comments because of what ensued. But, I wrote this, like, Jalen Hurts during that game struggled to read that defense. He did struggle against them. He looked lost a lot of the time. When you watch that game back, it's kind of shocking how much his development, how much he's developed since then. So, but at the same time, just like it's deja vu coming here and sitting here and looking at the stadium, there's a little, there's some commonalities. There's some things that kind of, there's some similarities coming into this game for the passing offense. Jalen Hurts looks somewhere between that 2021 version of himself and the MVP, runner-up that we saw last year. I think that he wants to kind of quiet that, again, I think that's his personality type. He talks about he doesn't care what it looks like on offense as long as they win. So I'm sure he'd be happy to come out of here with a win. But, let's be honest. I think he also wants to quiet some of these lingering concerns about the passing offense through two games.
Mm-hmm. You talk about a game that is in the distant past. Let's talk about a game that was in the more recent past. Honestly, it feels like a very long time ago. Over a week and a half ago was the last time that the Eagles played on Thursday Night Football against the Minnesota Vikings. It was a win, but I think some of us, and maybe some Eagles fans included, felt a little bit I don't know, a little weird about the Eagles offense at this point. We saw, we mentioned DeAndre Swift earlier. He had a career best 175 rushing yards. However, the passing game over the last couple of games, I think it's safe to say, really hasn't yet found their stride yet. I think perhaps they're getting there, and today they're going to look to try to put themselves over the top with all of this time that they have had to self-evaluate with the long break. What is the offense really looking to clean up specifically in week 3?
Yeah, I think it's the evolution of, defenses play you differently. You have to figure out the answers against those looks, and then they're going to change it up again. And I think that's what you're seeing this passing offense go through. You can look at the overall stats and, like the general, production, and you can kind of get misled a little bit just about how, it feels in game. A stat that I think helps kind of tell that story is that Jalen Hurts ranks last among all quarterbacks in the NFL in success rate. And success rate measures basically if you're staying ahead of the sticks, as football people would say it. Are you getting 3 or 4 yards each play and keeping yourself on schedule to convert for a first down? I think that's what we're seeing. What this offense is kind of missing right now is that steadiness. Kind of being able to sustain drives. So. Again, I don't think it's time necessarily to sound the alarms or, panic. It's early in the season. They had a long year last year and, a track record of being productive. We've got a lot of talent on that side of the ball. So I think it's just a matter of, figuring out what defenses are doing differently and kind of being able to adjust to that.
EJ, you mentioned it's early in the season, and we're still getting to know a lot about this team. This team is looking to find their identity, as we have talked about all season and preseason long. But let's talk a little bit about the defense. We're still getting to know new defensive coordinator Sean Desai. There are plenty of new faces in this defense, especially at safety and inside linebacker. The defense has been really stout against the run. But they've given up the most passing attempts in the league. They've also given up the most passing, or the most passing touchdowns also in the league. So you're seeing maybe some little concern there, especially going up into this week 3 matchup. You've got 2 very excellent Pro Bowl caliber receivers in Mike Evans and Chris Godwin on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. How are the Eagles going to attempt to limit their impact in this game?
Yeah, I think that the formula all year long for this Eagles defense is going to be to rely on the defensive line to generate pressure and kind of hope that the back end holds up long enough for that to happen. It's just the way that they've invested in this team. It's the philosophy behind, team building for the Eagles, as long as I can remember, is you build it up front. So, sometimes when the pass rush isn't getting home, it might seem like, man, these guys in the back end are really just not doing their jobs. And, again, that's how it's been built for a long time. So, they've had a lot of moving pieces in the secondary. We can talk about that a little bit later here. But, I think that that's a big part of it. I think at linebacker, they're still trying to figure things out. The Patriots really hammered home trying to, target the middle of the field, and the Eagles really struggled against that. And, the Vikings kind of did a little bit of the same thing. I think that, Zach Cunningham in particular played a little bit better against the run in week 2, but still there's some things they have to iron out in the middle of the field against the pass. So, that's something that they're going to have to keep working on. And I think that that's going to be something that Tampa's probably going to try to exploit. I think, with Chris Godwin, he lines up in the slot a lot. Mike Evans, even maybe, with crossing routes, he's a big receiver who, can, cause a lot of damage. So, yeah, I think that middle field defense is a big thing that they're going to have to clean up, but it really does. It starts with the pass rush. If they can, impact Baker Mayfield here tonight, I think that the Eagles defense will be able to limit points and be able to get off the field, create turnovers like they've been able to do. So, yeah, again, that's kind of, I think that's going to be the formula all year. I think that's just going to be, when the Eagles defense is playing well, you're going to know why. And when the Eagles defense isn't playing well, you have to remember that, some of it does fall on, that pass rush.
Before we get into our health report today, let's just quickly reminder, if you haven't already, if you have any questions or comments, head on over to inquire.com/Eagles Gameday. We would love to hear from you. As always, it's always our favorite part of the show to talk about some of your questions in just a little bit. But first, let's get to our health report and talk about some of the players that you should not expect to see on the field today. That would be running back Boston Scott. He is out with a concussion. Wide receiver Quez Watkins is out with a hamstring injury. And then, of course, there's cornerback Avonte Maddox, who is on injured reserve now with a pec injury. And he's out indefinitely. So the Eagles are going to have to make some adjustments in the slot. And that all being said, EJ, the Eagles are dealing with all of these injuries. However, they're going to be getting back a handful of players in today's game that did not play in week 2 against the Vikings. Who should Eagles fans expect to see out on the field today?
Yeah, I mean, Reed Blankenship's going to be back, and that's it's a big return for the Eagles secondary. Again, we mentioned earlier they're thin at safety, so getting him back is big. He was there all throughout training camp, and he's their best safety. It's kind of surprising the path that he's had to get there. Undrafted guy out of Middle Tennessee State, but he's a 5-year starter, and he's just kind of looked like he belongs ever since he got here. So yeah, definitely an important return for them there in the secondary. And then Kenny Gainwell will also be back after having ribs injury and missing the Thursday night game. And then the big one to me is James Bradbury coming back from a concussion. You mentioned that Avonte Maddox is out. It's almost like a sliding door of slot cornerbacks almost. James Bradbury traditionally an outside cornerback, but I do think you can expect him to play a lot in the slot tonight. You notice the rhyme there. That's I did not mean to do that, but I'll take the credit. I think that he's going to be, an important matchup in there because Chris Godwin, I mentioned it earlier, he spends a lot of time in the slot himself. He's led the Bucs in slot snaps on passing downs, I think 4 or 5 seasons in a row. Mike Evans will line up in there too. I think that I even could see the Bucs trying to, really exploit that matchup a little bit. But if Bradbury's in there, that's a favorable matchup for the Eagles. I think that the notion that you don't pay a cornerback, premium money to put him in the slot, I think that's a little bit dated because so many of these teams will line their best receivers up there, trying to, take advantage of matchups or trying to, get specific looks. And I think that having Bradbury in there will be able to kind of neutralize that. I think it's something you're going to see all year. We saw it during training camp. I think that the idea back then was more so matching him up against bigger tight ends, guys like Travis Kelce or Darren Waller, who spent a lot of time in the slot themselves. But, with Avonte Maddox out, I think he makes a lot of sense in there. I don't think he's going to be in there all the time. I think that you might see Sidney Brown. I think you might see Mario Goodrich in certain situations and certain calls. I also could see the Eagles using a little bit more base defense, with 5 defensive linemen and 2 linebackers on the field without a slot receiver. I think that there's going to be a lot of creativity. I think that it kind of varies week to week, but for this specific matchup with Chris Godwin being such a slot heavy receiver, I think it makes a lot of sense for Bradbury to be there.
Lots of permutations and combinations expected. However, as you mentioned, EJ, James Bradbury likely going to see a significant time in the slot this week. We're also going to see a couple of new faces out on the field today. The Eagles are elevating punter Braden Mann from the practice squad. If you recall, Aaron Sipos was released last week, and now they've got a new man on the block, a new man on the street.
I was hoping you'd get to that. Yeah.
Going to make a lot of man puns from here on out. And then, of course, the Eagles also elevated Devin Allen from the practice squad. This is going to be his NFL debut at age 28. It's pretty incredible. Obviously a 2-time Olympian as well, so a lot of accomplishments in his career. He is likely to be the kick returner replacement for Boston Scott. Just something to keep an eye on there, especially with this new punter and how the kinks work themselves out, especially because he is new to the team. He's had the extra time. He's had the long week to get himself together and to get used to the operation. And now we'll get to see him do it after spending a few seasons with the New York Jets. Most recently spent some time in training camp with the Pittsburgh Steelers, but did not earn the starting job. All right, let's head on over to the fan zone, the best zone, in my personal opinion. Thank you all for submitting your questions. Let's go over to our friend retired at 58. Congratulations, with a great question. Less of a question, more of a comment. They say they say Jalen Hurts is greater than Baker Mayfield, and that this is going to be an Eagles win today. Listen, Jalen Hurts, Baker Mayfield. Mayfield has been off to a pretty good start with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the post-Tom Brady era. I don't think a lot of us necessarily expected such a hot start from the Bucs. However, keep in mind, they've played against the Vikings, who the Eagles just beat, and they also have played against the Chicago Bears, who may be in the running for the first overall draft pick this year. So what do you make of this quarterback matchup, EJ?
Yeah, I think that there's some regression to the mean that's kind of due for both of these quarterbacks. With Jalen, I think that he's proven that he's a dynamic player and that he can kind of go through a slump and you don't really have the same level of concern that you may have 2 years ago. I think he's going to be able to figure it out. Even when I watch the Vikings game back, I feel like they're really close, in a lot of areas. You hear coaches say that a lot, and I think a lot of times it's coach speak, but I do think that they're kind of close here. They threw 2 touchdown passes to A.J. Brown. One got negated by a holding penalty, and one, fell inches away from his hands and could have been a pass interference call. So, I could see Jalen Hurts kind of, this is a little bit of a get right game. We can talk more about that and the matchup, against Todd Bowles later. It's not going to be easy by any stretch of the imagination, but I think that some of that, off season, light training camp rust is going to start to come off here. And in Baker Mayfield's case, when you watch the games, it's a little bit hard to really parse, the Vikings. It looks like that's a team that's just going to throw stuff against the wall and see what works every week. I think that they're a little undermanned there. So, I think that Baker Mayfield is kind of the opposite of Jalen Hurts, where you've seen a lot, several years of play from him that kind of suggests that he's not, maybe the guy that he's looked like the last 2 weeks. Now, listen, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are really, really talented receiving duo. They've got, decent offensive line. He's got pieces around him, but I think that he is maybe playing a little bit above what you'd expect, and, kind of for him to regress back down too. So, I think that as the season wears on, you're going to start seeing teams kind of show you who they really are. I think we saw some of that yesterday too. And I think, that's kind of why I'd be a little more, I think I'd agree with the retired at 58. He seems like a smart guy to be retired that young. So I think that he's onto something.
Thank you, retired at 58, for your question. Let's go over to Chris Kiefer 2. The future for the Eagles is wide receiver Devontae Smith. He will get a huge extension. Smith has 1 year remaining on his contract after this year, EJ. Listen, I don't want to maybe start bringing up topics for Eagles fans that might get them nervous beyond this season. However, what do you see right now as it stands in the future for Smith and the Eagles?
Yeah, the Eagles have such a long track record of paying the guys that they draft and develop, those homegrown players. So, I would agree with this, this observation. I think that they're going to be motivated to keep him in the building, and I think, the Eagles are so, good at maneuvering the cap that there probably are, ways to figure out how to pay both, him and AJ Brown long term. But when you look at Devontae, I think it's really, again, it's like, when you think of the types of players that the Eagles prioritize signing, he fits every, he checks every box. He's a dominant player on the field, especially this year with, AJ Brown kind of going through a little bit of a dry spell. You've seen Devontae step up and, hit some big plays, especially against the Vikings. And, I think that just, behind the scenes in the locker room, he's an important member of the team. I think that, he's the type of personality that meshes well with, obviously knows Jalen Hurts well. He meshes well with the rest of the team and meshes well with multiple personalities in a wide receiver room, because his whole career he's dealt with it. He's done what he went to high school with another, highly touted recruit. Obviously in Alabama, there were always 2 or 3 or 4, potential first round picks that he kind of had to share the ball with. So, when you think about all those factors, yeah, I definitely think that, he's going to be here long term. And I think he's going to be an important part of this season. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves to talk about the games. We've seen it already. Teams are going to continue to try and be creative to take away Dallas Goedert and AJ Brown. I don't think the Eagles can always just use that as an excuse not to target some of these guys. You see teams every week, kind of force feed their best players, and I think that that's going to be the case. But there are going to be times where Devontae Smith's going to have favorable matchups, and he's able to take advantage of those.
Matchups that was favorable for him was last week going up against the Vikings. 4 receptions for 131 yards, including a 63-yard touchdown reception. He had a great week, and we'll see if he can find some spark in today's game as well, in addition to AJ Brown. Thank you so much, Chris, for your question. And I'm sure we will revisit that question in the future. Let's go over to Mr. Eugene Krabs. It is an honor to be joined by Mr. Krabs, who would win a punt, pass, and kick competition between EJ, Josh, Jeff, and myself. This is a great question. I'll go ahead and answer first. I'm going to take myself right out of the competition. I don't think I would get very far personally. I know EJ, you and Jeff are big soccer guys. I think maybe you would split that. You're shaking your head. No, you don't think so? You don't think you'd be in the competition? Not at all.
Jeff actually plays soccer. I just watch soccer with my dogs on the couch. No, this is different. We're not the same here.
All right. Well, I was gonna split. Maybe I'll give Jeff punt, I'll give you kick, and I'll give Josh pass. And I'll take the L. How about you?
I vehemently disagree. I'm taking pass. I used to be a quarterback. All right. Now I know you might not be able to tell nowadays, but listen, I used to play quarterback, so I'm taking myself in pass. I'm taking Josh and punt. Explosive. I know he lifts a lot, so I'm taking Josh and punt. But when it comes to place kicking, Jeff's definitely taking that one. He literally plays soccer. So I appreciate this question. I enjoyed it, and I'm taking Jeff for the punt. I'm taking myself for the pass. I'm taking Josh for the punt. Are you taking? Wait, so Marcus Hayes, you think you win in the punt? All right, Marcus Hayes thinks he's winning the punt. He says he'll win the whole thing. I think I can throw further than anybody on the Inquirer staff, and I would welcome that challenge. I'm just gonna say it.
All right. Well, maybe we will have to actually have some sort of competition at some point this season among the entire Inquirer staff, and we'll see who wins. But thank you so much, Mr. Eugene Krebs, for that question. Now, let us go over to some of our thoughts from our good friend and fellow Inquirer Eagles reporter, Jeff McLean.
Hi, I'm Jeff McLean, Eagles beat reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer. Thanks for joining me here on Game Day Central. Talk about the Eagles' third game against Tampa Buccaneers, which should be an interesting one. Obviously, Monday night game, always big when they play on prime time. But both teams enter this contest 2-0 and kind of taken interesting routes to get to this point. The Eagles haven't quite played up to their standard, at least based upon last year. Buccaneers, I don't think many people expected them to be 2-0 at this point. New quarterback with Baker Mayfield, no more Tom Brady. Of course, the Buccaneers have a lot of talent on both sides of the ball, but that quarterback situation with Baker Mayfield, who just, the last 2 years, bumping from the Browns to the Panthers to the Rams, it just never seemed to kind of play like he did in that one season, 2020. But he's got out to a pretty good start, and he's got two really good receivers, one being Mike Evans on the outside, and then you have Chris Godwin on the inside in the slot. And I think let's just focus first with Godwin. And I think the interesting thing about that, as my co-hosts have probably spoken about at this point, is that the Eagles aren't going to be with their normal. Avonte Maddox is done for the season. I think we could see a mismatch of certain players in that spot, depending upon matchups. James Bradbury, who's coming off the concussion, he practiced there during camp for the first time, so there's a chance that you see him in there as well. Mario Goodrich should be active. He jumped in for Maddox in the last game against the Vikings and really struggled, but he seemed to get his legs up underneath him a little bit as the game progressed. And you could see a safety slide down to that spot as well. Eagles are getting Reed Blankenship back, so that helps them out, at least at that position. Linebacker still a question mark. Nakobe Dean is still out, so you're dealing with Zach Cunningham and Nicholas Morrow at that spot. On the offensive side of the ball, besides Mike Evans and Baker Mayfield and Chris Godwin, the Buccaneers have a good offensive line. I mean, Tristan Wirfs at right tackle is one of the best, aside from Lane Johnson at that position. But they are a little weak in the middle there. And I think that's kind of where you may see the matchup advantage favor the Eagles. Robert Hainsey is not the greatest center in the world, and they have a rookie, Cody Mauch, at right guard. I think the Eagles interior with Fletcher Cox, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Milton Williams, those four guys, as we saw in the first two games, are going to have an opportunity to kind of attack that middle and really force Baker Mayfield either to move out of the pocket or force throws. On the other side of the ball, I think the Eagles offense clearly has not played up to what we expect at them at this point. The pass offense just seems to be struggling. Jalen Hurts hasn't really gotten into a rhythm. As everyone with the team has said, what they're seeing from these defenses are kind of exotic looks and umbrella coverage. And that is kind of limited, Jalen's throw down to A.J. Brown. For the most part to Devontae Smith, he did have 2 long touchdowns against the Vikings. But otherwise, the intermediate games doesn't seem to be working. I think Jalen is not exactly seeing things in the middle of the field like he typically does. And some of that has to do with the pressures that he's seen. That people, these first 2 games, you had Bill Belichick and the Patriots. You had the Vikings with Brian Flores. 2 very similar schemes, 2 very similar defensive minds. The Buccaneers have one of the best defensive minds in the game in Todd Bowles. And we saw what Todd Bowles did to Jalen Hurts 2 years ago in the playoff game. And what he did there was he kind of actually mush rushed him and forced him to his left. And that's where Jalen really struggled to throw. But the Jalen of 2 years ago is not the Jalen that we've seen. Even though he struggled these first 2 weeks, I don't think he kind of gets he can get pushed into one corner and not find a way out of it. And he's got more weapons than he did 2 years ago, obviously with A.J. Brown really kind of being the main guy that's really helped him this last year. So look, the Eagles can just as easily focus on that run game. That's what they did against the Vikings when they took away the pass. just hammered it with the DeAndre Swift behind that strong offensive line. And I think ultimately where you're going to see see the Eagles, the favorites here. The trenches. Again, I think they have an advantage there. The Buccaneers still have talented Vita Vea. They have Shaq Barrett on the edge. They have good linebackers. They also have some good secondary guys. Antoine Winfield's been there a long time. Jamal Dean, Ryan Neal. These are good cornerbacks. But I think this is a game that I see the Eagles kind of eking it out eventually and winning. The final score that I had is Eagles 27 and the Buccaneers 20. So that's it here from me. Back to you guys at Game Day Central.
Thank you, Jeff, for your prediction. Before we get into our predictions, I just want to give a quick update. We just received the inactives list moments ago, so we can share all of that with you right now. As we already discussed, wide receiver Quez Watkins had been ruled out with a hamstring injury. Third quarterback Tanner McKee, inactive. A notable name, cornerback Mario Goodrich, is inactive today, so he will not be an option to play in the slot. As we already discussed earlier, running back Boston Scott out with a concussion. Offensive lineman Tyler Steen inactive. Defensive tackle Moro Ojomo inactive. And tight end Albert Akwebanam is also out. So we've got a lot of, I would say, names that we'd expect to be inactive this week. However, the big name there is Mario Goodrich, who is out, EJ.
Yeah, so I think you'll probably see a lot of, like we mentioned earlier, James Bradbury in the slot. I think you could see Sidney Brown, maybe in some pinch duty as well. But yeah, it seems like they're pretty confident, and Bradbury probably taking most of the snaps there. I think that's what you could kind of glean from the inactives there. And good job on Okwebu, by the way. I've
been practicing. Thank you.
Yeah.
So everyone wants to hear, EJ. What are your thoughts, your prediction for this game?
Yeah, sometimes I feel like Jeff and my score predictions are too similar. To let our viewers know and our readers know, I don't actually read Jeff's prediction when I write mine, so I'm not copying him or cheating off of his homework here. I have the Eagles 27-17. I think that the Eagles offense, I think they'll be able to get explosive plays tonight. I think that they'll be able to put up a reasonable amount of points, but I do kind of expect to see maybe some dry spells from them to keep this maybe a little bit lower scoring. This is a good Bucs defense. They've got a lot of talent on all three levels, and Todd Bowles has as good a record against Jalen Hurts as anybody, in terms of what he's been able to do to slow him down and kind of muddy up the picture for him. On the other side of things, I think that the Eagles defense, even though they have had their struggles, I think they're going to be able to match up pretty well. I think that the pass rush is going to be able to get home, and I think Baker Mayfield's the type of quarterback that if you can get pressure in his face, I think he'll struggle. The only matchup really that I think is maybe a red flag for the Eagles is Mike Evans against Darius Slay. I think that if everybody in the Eagles secondary was healthy, I think if Avonte Maddox were lined up, we're getting ready to play this game, I think James Bradbury I'd be curious if James Bradbury followed Mike Evans. He's the type of cornerback, Bradbury and Slay are complementary because to me, Slay works really well against guys like Devontae Adams, guys like Justin Jefferson, these technicians, these route runners, guys who are really, quick in and out of breaks. I think that's where Slay really excels. Where he can struggle sometimes is with those physical guys. We've seen him struggle against DK Metcalf particularly. And I think that Mike Evans kind of fits that bill a little bit more, of a guy who can beat you up and kind of beat you at the catch point just with physicality. So I think that is a matchup. If the Bucs do put up points, I think that that's going to be the one that I keep an eye on. But in general, I think that the Eagles are just the better team here. I think that we're going to start to see them, again, kind of be who we expect them to be over the course of the season. I think you knock off some of that rust and you kind of just figure out what works. So, yeah, I have the Eagles 27-17, kind of a comfortable win here in this Tampa Heat.
I'm also going with the win, EJ. However, I've got a little bit of a higher score, 31-23, getting the Eagles going there with the win again. I think that the Eagles are going to iron out some of the things, especially on offense, that were, giving them issues. They've had a little bit more time to think about, okay, this is what chaos the defenses have been giving us the first two games. And those two games came in rapid succession, getting that Thursday night game, week 2. Now they've had a week and a half to really be critical and self-evaluate and say, how can we try to beat some of these defenses that are throwing us these crazy looks? And now they have an opportunity to try to get well, especially in the passing game against the Bucs. So I think that they will find a way to do it, and perhaps they will win 31-23 exactly. And maybe not, probably not, but maybe they will. let's get over now to our Inquirer player picks. We're going to talk about some of the players. We've talked about a lot of players, but we'll be talking about the players that we're really going to be having our eyes on in today's game. EJ, who are you keeping an eye on today?
Yeah, Jalen Carter is my pick. There's going to be a lot of people here keeping an eye on him. He's an Apopka, Florida native, close to Orlando. So this is really as close to a homecoming as he'll get. He's got like 75 people in attendance, to watch him in the stadium tonight. So there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on him. And, listen, he's had a really good start to the season. It usually takes defensive tackles a little bit of time to adjust to the NFL. That has not been the case for him. I mean, he's been the type of player that already commands double teams, already commands kind of teams having a plan for him because he is so hard to block one-on-one. The Bucs offensive line has, some guys who have been around for a long time, but I do think that he's going to be able to win some matchups here. I'm going with Jalen Carter.
75 people in attendance. I'm not even sure if I know 75 people. So that's very impressive for Jalen Carter and a big game in front of his hometown crowd. My eyes are going to be on wide receiver AJ Brown. It was a very quiet week last week against the Vikings for him. He had 4 receptions for 29 yards. It's his second lowest total in his Eagles career. So to me, if I'm looking at anybody, I'm looking at AJ Brown to have, I guess, a rebound day in this game. I think it'll be a bigger one for him. The Eagles are going to be looking to get the passing game going in general. Why not try to get it to one of your most talented receivers? Obviously, this offense runs through Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert. The 3 of them should look to have the ball in their hands plenty in today's game. All right, everyone, it is time to wrap it up and get our heads in the game. We got to get set. Get typing out there. Thank you so much for tuning into Inquire Live at Game Day Central, sponsored by Xfinity. However, the fun is not over, especially on inquire.com/Eagles Game Day. If you're over on our website there, you can follow along with us throughout the game. We'll be posting and commenting in real time all game long from the press box, especially at halftime. I will be leading a Q&A, and I want to hear your questions. So head on over there.
Yeah, and remember to stay up to date on all of our Inquirer Sports coverage by subscribing to the Sports Daily newsletter. You'll see our most recent articles along with Phillies, Sixers, and college sports coverage. A lot of the articles we reference throughout the segment will be there, so be sure to get over there too.
We also have to shout out our colleague, Jeff McClain. A brand new episode of Uncovering the Birds with Jeff McClain drops this Friday. This one features Eagles' new starter on the defensive line, Milton Williams. Jeff learns about his roots. He talks to players and coaches about why Williams could be an important part of this team's success. So listen to Uncovering the Birds wherever you get your podcasts or go to inquire.com/podcasts. That is all for today. Thanks so much for turning in to Game Day Central.